Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. I'm your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Welcome. Those of you listening for the first time, welcome to the show. Those of you who are listening, some of you who are watching, and for a reminder, for some, video is available on YouTube and video is available on Spotify. So if you haven't checked out the video, check us out over there. It's just nice to be able to put a face to the voice and see the expressions as well as hear what it is that we are talking about. Well, Happy New Year to all the listeners out there for the World of UX podcast. We're going to start the year off by doing a redo. There was a topic I talked about in the latter part of last year. I spent some time talking about UX maturity. Now, I spent a lot of time talking about UX maturity actually, but I talked about consequences of UX deficiency. That's the title on the show. And for those of you who haven't already checked it out and you want to hear that show, then I welcome you. Go out to worldous.com, check out the new podcast website. You can search for any topic, you can search for any episode, and you can find exactly what you're looking for now, as opposed to rummaging through things and hoping that something was covered on the particular show and it was not. You can actually search and you can find key things. And you can search for the word consequences and you will find that episode. Now, when I delivered that episode and I tried to give an overview of UX maturity, I tried to help some people understand what UX maturity is, what it is not, what it affects, how it has been presented to us in a stereotypical manner over the years, and how we've really fallen short because we really did not have, we thought we did. I thought we did at one time. We thought we had an understanding of the topic, UX maturity. But as I continued to examine this over the years, I noticed we barely scratched the surface because we usually only talk about UX maturity from an organizational perspective. I found that there are other aspects of UX maturity that we need to consider. And this is something I've been looking at for some years. I remember talking to some people about it. Everybody has some really great input, the people I have talked to about UX maturity, but pretty much the vast majority of us, we were pretty much spoon-fed the old UX maturity model by Nielsen Norman back in the day. That was created in about the mid 90s or so. That was created. And so it was great. It was a great starter. It helped us to understand some things. And organizational UX maturity was critical, but we overlooked some other elements. There's some things that we did not recognize. And I remember, and I'm going to mention this now, I was going to save this for the end, but I'm going to mention it now. As I continued to observe this over the years and my model for UX maturity expanded, I created my own model, the applications, which I'm going to talk about today as I introduce today's new topic, as we do a redo, because I was not satisfied with what I did a few months ago. That's part of the reason for the redo, and I'll leave it at that. But I had a conversation with somebody recently, and I want to address this now in that I remember I had a conversation, and the person reminded me of a conversation that we had some years ago. And the person made a statement, and they said that the best thing that a person can do to contribute to UX maturity is develop their own UX maturity to make sure that they're mature. And I heard the person say that. I already believed that. For some reason, that person said that. And when I nodded, they thought that I was just like taking it in and that they were turning on the light bulb for me. That's something that I consider to be a common sense type of a point of arrival, if you will. That person thought that I took that idea and ran with it. I didn't. I don't know anybody who spends as much time as I do addressing the topic of UX maturity. I am well-traveled. I talk to a lot of people. I look at a lot of talk. I look at a lot of content. And I'm not saying this to toot my horn. I'm saying this to shoot down this mindset before I get into today's topic, to shoot down this thing where people don't like it when somebody came up with something or took something that they have a heart for and took it to another level I talked about this during the Sinister series. We need to be more supportive of one another. I did not take anything that I'm talking about and that I'm about to talk about today from anybody else. I didn't take it and run. I've never done that. I've never been like that when I was a kid. I didn't do that. And I'm surely not going to do it now. These ideas are my own. When there is an idea that did originate with someone else, I will tell you that. I want to make sure to say that up front. I want to make sure that people understand this. I want to make sure that as I present these topics, and this is something that I plan on really, I'm going to talk about it in more detail today. One of the reasons why I'm choosing to revisit this topic, but I want to start sharing a lot more detail in hopes that I can provoke some thought. I can provoke some people to want to spend more time focusing on UX maturity because it is an overlooked and a neglected topic in the discipline, which is one of the reasons why we are where we are today, because UX maturity has gone unmanaged for the most part. And something I say all the time, and I say it again today, if you do not manage UX maturity, it will manage you. And when UX maturity manages you and manages me, that's not going to play out the way that anybody is going to be comfortable with. So I want to revisit this topic today. And the topic that as I'm rebranding this and doing a redo on this topic from the previous show is harsh realities of UX maturity. I want to share a lot of different thoughts about UX maturity. We're going to do this for a few weeks, but we're going to talk about several aspects of UX maturity, several concepts, several thoughts that are going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. But when we consider these things, if we will take the time to invest in and focus on and put energy into these things, everybody is going to benefit. So, harsh realities of UX maturity. Consider this part one, as we are going to take that previous topic about the consequences. We're going to redo the entire thing, and I'm just going to take my time because I just spent 1 week on it before, and we're going to get into the details of this again in hopes that we can provoke some thought and get some people on board with participating in this effort. So right off the bat, some people didn't hear that. Some people are new to the show. Some people never heard the concept of UX maturity at all. So I'll challenge you. I'm going to give you some foundational things today. And I'm going to challenge you to just do a search for UX maturity. Look at my old talks on UX maturity, but do a search on UX maturity. You will find a lot of information that exists. I will challenge you to look at that information and subject it to critical thinking, because there are a lot of schools of thought that have come up about UX maturity, although most of them still only focus on organizational UX maturity. You'll find out in a few moments that we're going to go well beyond that. And it's sort of interesting how that UX maturity, when it was initially presented by Nielsen Norman, it was something that it had a timeline associated with it. And one of the things that turned a lot of people off about that old story, that old model of UX maturity, was that it could take you upwards to some 20 plus years to achieve the highest level. And one of the things that a lot of people have become uncomfortable about as it pertains to user experience is they want to get somewhere tomorrow. They want to move fast. This agile thing and this microwavable mindset, as I like to call it, is something that has really infected a lot of people. And when somebody assigns or attributes a long timeline, a lot of people many times they will simply abandon that. They don't want anything to do with it. Now, will it take 20 years to reach the highest levels of UX maturity? In my opinion, the answer to that is no. It's no. It doesn't have to take 20 years, but it's not going to take 2. And a lot of the models, I've seen a few in recent years. There was one, I believe it was published through the folks at Envision, actually, and they're not around anymore. But someone, I won't say who, created a UX maturity model that instead of something that you had to identify, examine where you really were, engage in a lot of critical thinking, and then it was going to take some time, some degree of time some realistic amount of time to get there. They pretty much eliminated that. And instead of it being, you could go from this level to this level to this level, from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, things of that nature, sort of a linear type of thing. They fixed it so you could get anywhere really, really quickly. And it lacked the critical thinking. It lacked some of the emotional intelligence that was embedded in some of the other models. And it was unrealistic and pretty much infused people with a sense of Dunning-Kruger, in that people were going to see themselves as being more mature than what they really were. And if you see yourself in an inaccurate way, that's always detrimental. It is critical, because for those of you that don't know, UX maturity involves examining. You look at a set of standards, you look at a set of things to measure yourself by, and you will come to a realistic and as accurate of a conclusion as you can. If step 5 is the highest level, but you have a lot of traits associated with step 2 or level 2, then you're at level 2. You're not at level 3, even though you want to be at level 3. And a lot of people want to be at level 3. They want to be at level 4. They want to be at level 5. And so they will attribute different things to that level and see themselves on that level when it's not the case. The problem with misapplying or arriving at the wrong conclusion is that you will fail to make the appropriate adjustments. You will not see what you really need to do in order to improve, in order to thrive. And then that's going to cascade. Now we're getting back to the consequences that I was trying to talk about when I broached this topic the first time at the end of last year. So it is critical in this age of the neurotic, because there's a lot of neurotic people in UX today. There's a lot of people who lack, frankly, harsh realities, right? Who lack emotional intelligence. And the first key aspect of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Whether you like it or not, whether you're comfortable with it or not, whether it makes you feel good or not, you still have to be accurate in the way that you assess yourself. You still have to arrive at a proper conclusion. And okay, so I'm at level 1. Okay, well, good. At least you know where you are. And when you see what is required to be at level 2, to be at level 3, level 4, level 5, and there's a lot of models, however many levels there are, you always know what it takes to get to the next level, and you can realistically establish a strategy, or I should say establish a realistic strategy that will help you to get there. And the benefit is it's going to help you, it's going to help your team, it's going to help your company, it's going to help the discipline at large, it's going to help your users. But that self-awareness, that accuracy is critical. So I've sort of jumped way ahead of where I wanted to go. Let's, for the sake of those who do not know what UX maturity is and who are wondering what I was talking about earlier when I said that everybody focuses on organizational, but there's more than that. That's part of what I want to serve up today. So I want to take my sweet time this time. And I want to today talk about the types of UX maturity. That's all we're going to focus on today. So, and we'll do this piece by piece, and we'll help everybody gain an understanding of what UX maturity is and what we're supposed to be striving for. So again, UX maturity is basically, when you think about it, it is a means of measurement serving as an indicator. I want to read exactly what I've got here. Don't want to mess it up. Of how well UX operations are understood and how they are supported. So, and you'll see some of these things we're going to talk about here as I have this illustration on screen. So that's the way it was always presented. That's the one that's at the top here in this illustration. For those of you that are only listening today, I've got some of the different aspects that I want to address on this episode today. So organizational UX maturity, if you go and look at that old Nielsen Norman illustration, that's what it focuses on, organizational UX maturity. And are you able to be supported? Do you have leadership in your corner? Do you have a champion? Or is UX being led by visual designers? Is it being led by developers? And so that's the type of thing. Or is it embedded in everything that we do? And is everybody on board with UX and giving a huge thumbs up across the board? And we used to look at that. We used to examine ourselves in light of that. And we used to grade ourselves. And okay, we're here, but we want to be here. And so we use it. And it was great. It was great at the time. But there's more. Organizational UX maturity is not enough. I had that conversation I mentioned with the person back in 2012, 2013. I wasn't doing a lot of stuff with UX maturity. I was doing what everybody else was doing. I was looking at the Nielsen-Norman model, and I was trying to look at where the organization was. I wasn't looking at myself. I was not looking at the discipline. I wasn't looking at the team. I wasn't looking at my stakeholders. And we had that conversation. I did agree that, I mean, shout out to the person who said that. It was true. I already believed it. That person said it. I'm happy when I hear people say great things. And it's true. The best that any of us can do, if you want to impact the UX maturity of your organization in the best manner possible, the best thing you can do is work on you. And there's a lot that goes into that. We're going to talk about that as we get into this series a little bit. But it's not enough. Organizational UX maturity is not enough. I learned, and I went to work for another organization some years later. I worked for another organization, and at that organization, it was my responsibility. I was a manager, and it was my responsibility to manage UX maturity. Now, by now, and this is some 3, 4, 5 years later. Well, about 3, 4 years later. Now I'm sort of embedded in the organizational UX maturity mindset, and they challenged me. This is where the light bulb came on for me, that it's about more than organizational. That what about projects? And we had something called lighthouse projects at this company. Of course, we've got 20, 30, 40, 50 projects. Everybody's got a ton of projects that they're working on. But out of all the projects that we were working on, there were 5 that had more visibility with management. And so they became the priority pieces that we worked on. And we had to, in the midst of everything we were doing, we had to make sure that we were identifying the level of UX maturity that was reflected by how that particular project, those lighthouse projects were running. And so I began to really digest that. And I began to think about it. And I began to see, you know what? So UX maturity is not just an organization. It's not limited to an organization. Wow. How many more benefits? How much more can we benefit our UX operation? I began to think when we start looking at it, when it applies to different elements, not just organization, but the projects. Then I began to notice, because I helped in that organization, I helped to build the UX team for that division from the ground up. And I began to notice that UX maturity was not only, again, for the organization, not only for the projects, but there was a different UX maturity level for each of the stakeholders. So I began to assign, I didn't report out on this, I just began to do it. I began to assign UX maturity levels to every stakeholder, to every owner, not just the stakeholders, because then there might be 8, 9, 10 stakeholders, but there was always 1 or 2 people who owned that project. So I assigned a UX maturity level to them. There were things that they understood about UX. I began to notice that if you assign a UX maturity level by project, by stakeholder, it really helped inform the strategy. It informed the way that I would communicate. It informed the way that I would build my artifacts, my deliverables. It affected the level of detail that I had to operate in, the way that I chose to communicate with these people. There was so much that was going on. And by doing that, long story short, eventually we were considered in that division at that company, over 385,000 employees at that company and tons of UX teams. And they said that we had the best run UX team in the entire organization. And it was due to that mindset that was really birthed out of, please assign a UX maturity and manage the UX maturity for these projects. And I went further. And so when I'm talking to person A who had a lower UX maturity level, that helped me to empathize with each one of them based on whether person A, B, C, D, or E. The way that I communicated was based on the empathy that was dictated by the UX maturity level that they had. And so that really helped to optimize everything that we did. So by now, the light bulbs are going off everywhere. And I began to notice, as you see now, you got organizational UX maturity. You have at the bottom of this illustration, personal and team UX maturity. And so you can sort of blend the stakeholders and the product owners, product managers in with that. Your own UX team have a UX maturity level. I'm going to talk about the details of that next week and how you can gauge it. What is it based on? What are some of the different types of things that you can examine? I'll give you a hint with each one, sort of a sneak peek with each one of these too. Then there's discipline-wide UX maturity. Everything that we do within a given organization, millions of organizations, millions of UX teams, but what each UX team does impacts the discipline-wide UX maturity. Yes, there is a discipline-wide UX maturity. And as an individual, I want to make sure that being aware of the fact that what I do contributes to that discipline-wide UX maturity, the perception of UX, the well-being with which UX can operate. How am I impacting that? A lot of people don't think about things like that. A lot of people don't want to think about things like that. A lot of people don't want that responsibility, but I've got news for you. You have responsibility to impact UX to its betterment all the time, whether it's a conversation that you're having with somebody during a meetup, whether it's that meeting that you have with that stakeholder. Did you positively impact UX maturity? And that's something that's going to play out over the long haul. It's something that I always believe that every meeting is an opportunity to drive UX maturity forward. I firmly believe that. I live by that. I try to make sure that everything I do is aligned with that. Now, the people who are being impacted, do they know this? No, they don't. Matter of fact, it's going to be a while before they're able to even understand anything, before they're going to even care. Because a lot of people, and another reason that we have to manage UX maturity, because there's a lot of people who touch UX maturity that don't necessarily, let me rephrase that. There's a lot of people that touch UX maturity that couldn't care less about UX maturity. And that's part of what makes it difficult to manage UX maturity, because you have so many people who are touching it, who are a part of its landscape, if you will, who are not going to contribute to its well-being, who don't really care, who don't know. Have you ever done work for somebody? I know what the answer is, but I'm saying it anyway. We'll just cause a little introspection here. We'll force a little introspection. But have you ever done work for somebody and all they want you to do, they just want you to give me your recommendations, give me these designs, give me this so I can go and show it to whoever. When somebody does that, that's reflective of a low UX maturity level. Okay. That's not being critical of anybody. It's just saying what it is. We've all experienced it. If we respond in kind, if we do exactly what they're asking us to do, we're going to detrimentally impact the UX maturity level of the discipline-wide maturity level. We're going to detrimentally impact our teams. We can detrimentally impact ourselves. We're going to detrimentally impact our users. UXers are the voice of reason. Asterisk. we are not always in a position to do everything that we know that we need to do. That's one of the interesting things about UX. You can know 10 things that you need to do to drive the work forward, to drive the discipline forward. You might only be able to do 8 in a given setting. And in another project, you might be able to do all 10. In another project, you can only do 3 or 4 because you have time constraints. We're always limited by constraints, budget constraints, political constraints. There are so many different types of constraints that we have. And then as UX professionals, we always have to be aware of the battles that we're in. We have to pick our battles, and we need to navigate around those battles, because the bottom line is whatever we do, we have to take everything forward. But that does not mean that we can hit every nail on the head. It simply isn't always doable. And that's a reality that people in UX have to deal with. The sad part of that is that people with low, and if you have a higher UX maturity level, you know that. For people who have lower UX maturity levels, and that includes stakeholders, they don't. They want us to hit all things. Whatever their concept is of the equivalent of nails, metaphorically nails in that situation, they want us to hit every nail on the head. You can't hit every nail on the head. They can't hit every nail on the head with the work that they're doing, but they hold us to a standard usually that is unrealistic. And we'll talk about that as we go through this series as well. We're held to standards that are extremely, in many cases, from a holistic perspective, are impossible to achieve. So we need to understand what we can and cannot do. We're going to need to, as part of a UX maturity shot in the arm, so to speak, we need to be able to communicate about what can and can't be done. We need to achieve a level of understanding and approval about what we can and can't do, and then use that understanding, eventually navigate everybody to that place, but take everybody forward so that we can deliver something that's going to work for our stakeholders, for our users, for our team, and again, for the discipline at large. UX maturity is such a fickle beast. It's such an interesting concept, but again, we have to be committed. We have to be aware of it. We have to be committed to managing. But let me get through this list again. So there's organizational UX maturity. I didn't touch all these on the screen. Personal and team UX maturity, which includes stakeholders. It includes leadership. Discipline-wide UX maturity. We're always impacting UX as a whole. And then one that's on here, and some people who can see the video and have already seen this are going to be a little bit shocked, and they're wondering, wow, wait a minute. Educational UX maturity? That's the last one. Yes. Academia has UX maturity associated with it. And again, I'm going to go through all of these in great detail before we're done with this series and try to help everybody understand what each one of these entails. But I did promise, and we're going to wrap up here, I did promise to give you a sneak peek, didn't I? So consider this. We already talked about organizational UX maturity and what it is. But so just think about it. I'm going to repeat this. I sort of said this, but I'll repeat it. Ask yourself, if you're trying to gauge UX maturity for your organization, look at how well UX is received. And if so, how well is it received? Remember, this is just one aspect of UX maturity. It's not the whole. And a lot of times that's what people would look at. And that, if you look at that only, you're going to do yourself a disservice, and you're going to miss a lot of opportunities to grow. Personal UX maturity. One of the things that we can look at here. And basically, again, has to do with things like an individual's understanding of the discipline and your personal breadth of operation. How much of UX, it's 250 plus methods, methodologies, techniques, deliverables. How much of them can you apply? How much of them do you know? How many of them do you use? So this is where we need to be aware of things like that to measure our personal UX maturity. And please know, this applies to everyone So this applies to practitioners, again, UX leaders, as I've been saying, stakeholders, PMs, developers, everybody who's involved in UX is tied into this. And everybody has a personal UX maturity level. Everybody, nobody, whether they like it or not, everybody has a personal UX maturity level. Team UX maturity level. Well, you can think of that the same way you do with team, but it's a collective measurement. For example, how much skill and knowledge does your team have collectively? When you put it all together, how many people are on your team? 3, 5, 10, 20, 50? There's a team UX maturity level and everybody impacts it. Everybody. Nobody is left out. And to use an adage from the world, you're no stronger than your weakest link. So keep that in mind. There's academia. This will give you a little bit of insight into academia. What is academia? UX maturity. It is the same as organizational, but it also applies to how well that educational system supports and fosters maturity on personal level. Example, and I've got a bunch of stuff listed here. I want to be really selective as to which one I share with you. How well does an organization demonstrate integrity through their instructors? In other words, who's teaching the courses? If you have an organization that is like somebody can graduate from a program, don't know anything about UX yet, and the very next week, this happens, folks. Boot camps, I just tell you, boot camps. A person can graduate on Friday and be teaching in that same boot camp the following Tuesday. That's unethical. So as you can see, ethics, check out my talk on UX and the Good Doctor. And there's a lot of stuff there where we talk about the Hippocratic Oath and parallel it to give a model for how you can look at UX from an ethical perspective. And that it's not ethical to have somebody who just graduate, who has nothing really, they don't bring anything to the table but some excitement, to allow them to teach the course. And so when that happens in the boot camps, because they're the ones notorious for doing it, they're doing everybody a disservice. We're pretty sure that the students, the enrollees, don't know that they've got a person who's only a few months ahead of them when it comes to skill teaching the course. I don't think people would be happy to know that. And I just told a lot of people that is happening. Yeah, that happens a lot, folks. And the last one, discipline-wide. Discipline-wide. And what is that again? Same as organizational, but again, it's applicable to the discipline as a whole. So for this one, let's consider the aspect of from an examination perspective. Look at how well people are respecting the pioneers and reflecting their principles in their work. So when you see groups of people, yes, so there's a little bit of overlap with personal, because personal contributes to discipline-wide. And there are large sections of people in UX today who have no respect for the pioneers of the discipline, don't know who the pioneers are, don't respect them, don't care what they have to say, and have no intention on embracing the types of things that they present. And matter of fact, I have talked to people and have heard people say that they think that fundamentals are outdated and we don't need them today. Mind you, they want to do a lot of work in AI and don't know that it's artificial intelligence, which means that it's not real. And so if you don't couple that artificial intelligence with people that have bona fide intelligence and domain knowledge, then how are you going to know when AI is hallucinating? You're not. So when we have a pocket of people who think like that, and that brings discipline-wide UX maturity down. So I hope this all makes sense, folks. This is interesting. It's critical for us to know and understand and to embrace today. It's sad though, because some people have started teaching that UX maturity is irrelevant. There are people that are saying we don't need to spend any time on it. And UX maturity is real. And if you don't spend time on it and you don't manage it, again, it's going to manage you. And if UX maturity manages you, it manages me, that doesn't end well. Let's take it back. Let's embrace UX maturity today. Let's learn as much as we can about it. I hope I've given people some food for thought and that they're willing to step forward and embrace this today. It is really critical that we do these things. And if we do it, and I always say this over and over again, everybody benefits, everybody wins. So, folks, that's all the time we have for today. This is our foundation for this topic, and we're going to share different aspects of UX maturity as we dive into this. Again, hope we give folks a lot to think about and hoping that we can use this to help vault the discipline forward. So we hope you got a lot out of that today. We hope we gave you a lot to think about. This is a great and interesting topic. I'm sure people are already, wheels are turning and you realize how important it is. But we will build on this in the coming weeks and share a lot more with you about UX maturity. But that's all the time we have for today. We're going to sign off here. So until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until then, happy UXing, everybody.